I want to talk with you today about my understanding of narcissism and specifically how it impacts your emotional disposition. And in doing so, I'm going to identify what I consider to be the 5 primary emotions associated with narcissism. Now, it's kind of interesting how I arrived at these conclusions, and I'm just going to share with you. This is my Les Carter theorization. You're not going to necessarily read it in any other textbooks, but I've been practicing this for so long that I actually learn from the people that I work with. Now, going way back early in my career, I used to do a lot of anger management workshops, and I would talk about all the different ways that anger could be expressed. And one of the things that I very quickly figured out, even as a young buck in this profession, anger is a secondary emotion. It's secondary to other emotions that are feeding into that particular sensation of anger. Now, just to kind of give you a foreshadowing, anger to me is the 5th primary emotion that is a part of narcissism. But what I would do is, as I was talking with people in my workshops, I would start identifying some of the other emotional strains and struggles that if left unresolved, they would result in anger. And I worked my way backwards, and that's where I started discovering it all starts with this narcissistic foundation. Now, let me see if I can kind of walk you through these 5 primary emotions, and then we'll see how it all interacts. The first emotion that I identify as primary with narcissism is kind of an easy one. It's your pride, egotism. When we talk about pride, that's one of those emotions that sometimes we can speak about in a positive way. You take pride in your country, take pride in your children, take pride in a job well done, and it means that you have a sense of internal well-being and satisfaction. But the pride of narcissism is self-absorption. You're very self-impressed, and it leads to a craving to be in control. Do you see how that is just part of the narcissistic bent? The person who has this pridefulness and this egotism is very easily critical. They're easily impatient. They interrupt constantly. They take input from no one because they believe that they own truth and they're the ones that are the smartest people in the room. And so when we have this strong egotism, this pridefulness, it sets up so much else. Now, once a person goes into their place of pride, a second primary emotion that shows up is fear. Now, the reason I say that is I want you to notice when you have that narcissistic person who has that real strong need for control, and then someone starts calling them out, what do? They go straight into the cover-up mode. Basically, we've talked about how narcissists have a real high level of defensiveness. They don't like anybody challenging them. And when they go into that defensive place, it's their way of implying your accusations scare me. I'm threatened by the fact that you think differently and that you would not think well of me. It's part of their egotism, but then it comes out in fear. And as a result, they have a lot of secrets that they keep. They have a lot of a strong need to justify and rationalize why it's okay for them to be you. And as a part of that, then they flip it around. You've heard the old saying, the best defense is a good offense. And as a result, these fearfully based individuals can show their defensiveness by blame shifting and things of that nature. But make no mistakes, it's all about keeping their walls of self-protection up. So you have pride, which leads to fear. A third primary emotion is loneliness. Once you have that self-absorption and all of the egotism that goes with it, and then you start constructing your walls of self-defense, it pushes away individuals at that place of intimacy. Now, many narcissists completely miss this. Of course, they miss all 5. Well, they usually will say they have anger, but then they blame it on everybody else. But they almost completely miss the loneliness part. Basically, when we talk about loneliness being a primary emotion, it's the emotion of disconnect. It's when you feel like you're not fully understood or you're not fully connected. You don't have the kind of intimacy that you're wanting. Now, narcissists, they may say, oh, I have plenty of friends. I have plenty of people that I'm connected to, but they're not talking about heart connection. They're talking about transactions or tools or people that they can use. But narcissists have a great deal of struggle with anything that has to do with making connections down at that heart base. Pride, fear, then loneliness. The fourth primary emotion that is part of narcissism is inferiority. Now, inferiority is one of those kind of characteristics that shows up in many different kinds of ways, where you might have problems with guilt or shame or inadequacy, those kind of things. But with the narcissist, their struggles with inferiority often show up as superiority. They must lord themselves over other individuals. It's like, no, somebody's got to be the top dog around here, and that's going to be me. But it reveals that they have what I call an evaluative approach toward life. How do you grade up? Now, did I make an A, B, C, D, or F? And they're constantly on a grading scale, and they rationalize, this is part of that defensiveness that they have, well, I'm at the top of the rung, the rest of you poor slobs are beneath me, but actually it belies a struggle on the inside. They don't want to be seen as being inadequate. And so they cover that part up, but their craving to be superior is nothing more than a compensation for their fears of inferiority and inadequacy. And then the fifth primary emotion is anger. So we have pride with all of its self-absorption. We have fear with all of its defensiveness. We have loneliness with the disconnect. We have inferiority with the sense that said, maybe I'm not good enough, but then they cover it up with superiority. And the net result is they feel angry. And the anger can show up in so many different ways, whether it's through loud, brash outbursts at other individuals, or the passive aggressive, which tends to be more of the covert variety of anger, and so many other things in between. And so when someone, going back to my early years doing my anger management workshops, when someone would come into my workshops and then counseling office and talking about their anger, I would just kind of go backwards and say, let's take a look at some of these other emotions that are there, and inevitably there it would be. Now, one of the things that this speaks of is we each have a need to figure out, if those are the 5 primary emotions, what are the better alternatives? And we want to have a sense of honesty. We want to recognize, that could be me. I'm capable of all 5 of those primary emotions. So as you have a sense of insight and awareness, you can look at yourself and realize there are moments when I have those very kind of inclinations. Hopefully, it's going to become a springboard for you to have greater insight and wisdom, and therefore the proper adjustments. With the narcissist, they don't have insight, they just blame. And so with pride being a primary driver, let's take a look at its alternative, conscientiousness, where you learn how to consider yourself. Yes, you want to take care of yourself, but in the context of community. And there's a sense of goodness and decency and reliability and courtesy, as opposed to just raw self-absorption. Instead of the primary emotion of fear driving all of this defensiveness, then you want to focus on learning how to trust. Now, sometimes you can't fully trust other individuals, but you at least want to make sure that you are a trustworthy individual and you have self-trust. And the more you know of yourself as a trustworthy, self-trusting individual, you don't operate with the same kind of fear and the need to defend and cover up and justify. Instead of the third primary emotion of loneliness, you can have a sense of emotional connection, and that's the empathy factor. That's where you learn how to read someone else's needs and feelings and emotions from their vantage point. You're willing to share that with those who are able to reciprocate. Obviously, narcissists tend not to know what to do with that, but that would be something that you could become committed to. Conscientiousness, trust, and then empathy. And then the fourth primary emotion was that of inferiority. Well, I'm hoping that you could then learn to develop an appreciation for a person's innate value. We don't have to measure ourselves as being one up and one down. Who's better? Who's worse? Why don't we just say each person is unique, each person is distinct, but let's just get rid of all this evaluation and one-upping of one another and acknowledge each of us in our own way has a sense of value. Let's live into that. And then finally, well, when we say that anger is the fifth primary emotion, we can look at its better alternatives, and that would be a good assertiveness. Calm firmness is what I would focus on. Calm firmness that leads to good boundaries, but also it allows you to have commitments to kindness and goodness and patience and those kinds of characteristics. So that's a whole lot that I just put in there, and there's much that could be added to that. But what I'm hoping is that you can begin watching people, watch yourself, watch other individuals, and see if you can spot these 5 primary emotions that are here that are a part of narcissism. And as you recognize that, then I'm hoping you can stay away from the temptation to just kind of match pitch, which is what narcissists are experts at doing. They have these problems, and before you know it, they get you pulled in and you start reacting in kind. No, I don't want to do that. But instead, you're going to notice that with your own honesty and your own willingness to grow, you're going to look at the much cleaner alternatives. And in doing so, this insight becomes the platform for some really good growth that you can have. So be armed with good insight, be armed with awareness, and commit yourself to being an insightful and transparent and honest individual. And in doing so, I'm hoping that you can find the emotional stability that will simply not come with that narcissistic person who's stuck in those 5 primary emotions. Now, I do hope that videos such as this will stimulate you to good insight and awareness. If you've not already done so, go beneath the video and hit that subscribe button. We'd love to make you aware of more videos that come along. I know sometimes when you watch videos such as this, it can stir up some thoughts on the inside that you might want to unpack with a licensed professional counselor. And all through my career, I've been looking for people that I can refer to. And right now, online counseling is extremely popular and in many cases quite necessary. We have a link below that takes you to a link with a trusted sponsor that we have. And if you need to get some counseling and unpack it, I would encourage you to do so and check that out. In addition, I want you to check out our websites, drlescarter.com, survivingnarcissism.tv. We have much that's on there, and we're building those websites even more so. And then check out our online video workshops, my books, and things like that, even coffee mugs. I do hope that this stimulates you to recognize those 5 primary emotions are a part of humanity. But as you have that sense that says, I want to grow, I want to be the person that gets it, and I want to move beyond that towards the better path, then that can take you to a place of steadiness, decency, and goodness. And I'm hoping that you'll be able to live in your good place of peace.